There's a version of that night I've replayed maybe 100 times, not because I'm proud of how it ended, but because of what I understood about my family and about myself in the space of about 4 minutes standing outside a restaurant I signed the deed on. Let me back up. My brother's name is Derek. He's 3 years older than me, and for most of our lives, he was the one our parents pointed to when they wanted to show the world what their family produced. He was tall, charming, played varsity baseball in high school, got into a state school on a partial scholarship. My father talked about Derek the way some men talk about their best years. Like Derek was his best years, just walking around in a 28-year-old body. I was the other one, not the bad one, not the one who got in trouble or embarrassed anyone at the dinner table. I was just the one who didn't register, the one my mother would introduce at church as, and this is our younger one, Nathan. No profession mentioned, no accomplishment attached, just younger one. Like a footnote she hadn't gotten around to editing out. I never said anything about it. That's the part I think about a lot now. I just absorbed it year after year and kept moving. What my family didn't know, what I deliberately kept from them, was that I had been building something for almost 6 years. I started my first logistics consulting firm at 23 out of a 2-bedroom apartment in Columbus. By 26, I had 7 clients, 3 contractors, and enough cash flow to stop worrying about rent. By 28, I had quietly partnered with a commercial real estate group and acquired partial ownership in 2 mixed-use properties in the metro area. One of them was a building on Riverside that housed, on its ground floor, a restaurant called Callaway's, a private dining and event space that the local food press had called one of the best in the city. My family ate at Applebee's on birthdays. They had no reference point for Callaway's. They didn't know I had anything to do with it. Derek's engagement party was scheduled for the second Saturday in March. His fiancée, a woman named Brittany, had apparently wanted something upscale, something that would photograph well, something with a private room and a prix-fixe menu. Her family had connections, or so Derek told everyone. Her uncle knew someone who could get them into Callaway's on short notice. I got a text from my mother 3 weeks before the event. It said, "We're doing Derek's engagement party at a really nice place downtown. I'll send you the address. Dress nice. Not an invitation, and dress and an instruction." I didn't respond right away. I sat with my phone on the kitchen counter and looked at the address she sent and felt something move through my chest that I didn't have a clean word for. It wasn't anger exactly. It was more like recognition. Like a sound you've been hearing so long, you stopped noticing it, and then one day it suddenly becomes very loud. I knew that address. I had been to that address for a walkthrough 14 months earlier. I had signed documents related to that address in a conference room on the 4th floor of a building 2 blocks away. I texted back, "I'll be there." I didn't tell her anything else. The week before the party, I called Marcus, who manages Callaway's day-to-day operations. Marcus has worked with me for 4 years. He's the kind of person who doesn't say much but misses nothing. And when I told him the situation, that my family had booked a private dining room and that I was planning to attend as a guest, he was quiet for a moment and then said, "You want me to say anything?" I said no. I told him I just wanted the evening to go normally. Whatever they booked, they get. Whatever they ordered, they receive. I wasn't there to make a point. I was there because Derek was my brother, and I had decided, maybe naively, that I still wanted to be present for things. Marcus said he understood. I asked him one thing: don't introduce me unless someone asks directly who I am. He said he'd make sure the staff knew. I wore a navy suit that Saturday, nothing flashy. The watch on my wrist was a clean, simple piece, not the kind that announces itself across a room. I drove myself. I got there 8 minutes early and sat in my car in the parking structure for a few minutes. Not because I was nervous, exactly, but because I was being honest with myself about what I was walking into. My family doesn't do subtlety. They do hierarchy. They do assigned worth. And I had spent the last 6 years building an entire life outside of that system quietly, without asking anyone's permission or validation. Walking through those doors meant, on some level, stepping back into the old system for a night. I wanted to be clear with myself about that before I got out of the car. I got out of the car. They were gathered near the entrance when I arrived. Derek, Brittany, her parents, my mother, my father, 2 of my aunts, a cousin I hadn't seen in 3 years. Maybe 18, 20 people total. My mother was wearing a dress I hadn't seen before, dark green, and she had her hair done. She looked happy. She looked the way she always looked when she was somewhere she felt was important. Derek saw me first. He raised his chin in acknowledgement, the specific nod men give each other when words would take too much effort, and went back to talking to Brittany's father. My father shook my hand. He asked how the drive was. I said fine. That was the full extent of our conversation for the first 20 minutes. I was standing near the edge of the group, drink in hand, when my cousin Kyle drifted over and started asking me about work. I said I was in logistics consulting. He nodded the way people do when they don't know what that means and don't want to admit it. He said that sounded stable. I said it was going well. He said that was good and then excused himself. Then my aunt, my father's sister Renee, came over. She's the kind of woman who speaks in volume rather than content. She said it was so nice that I came, that she knew it was a long drive, that she hoped I wasn't finding it too expensive, the parking downtown, the drink minimums at these kinds of places. I told her I was fine. She patted my arm the way you pat a stray dog and moved on. Then the hostess came out to let us know our room was ready. And that's when it happened. I was near the back of the group as we moved toward the entrance, and my mother dropped back beside me. She put her hand on my arm, the same arm Renee had just patted, and she lowered her voice. Not a whisper, but close. She said, "Nathan, I just want to make sure you're comfortable tonight. This place is not cheap. The family is covering the cost. But if there's anything on the menu if you feel like it's a lot, you don't have to order everything." I looked at her. She continued, "I know you're still getting established. We don't want you to feel any pressure. Just be mindful, okay?" I said, "I'm okay, Mom." She gave me a look that said she wasn't sure she believed me. It was a specific look. I had seen it at high school graduation, at Christmas dinners, at every family event where I showed up without a title she could brag about. The look that said, "I love you, and I have already decided the ceiling of what you're capable of, and this moment is confirming it." She moved ahead to rejoin the group. I stood there for a second, and then Marcus appeared. He came through the glass doors at exactly the wrong moment, or exactly the right one, depending on how you look at it. He was in his usual dark jacket, earpiece in, moving with the kind of quiet efficiency that people in his role develop over years. He saw me and his expression shifted, not dramatically, not in a way that performed anything for anyone, just the shift of recognition, of someone who knows who they're standing in front of. He said, "Mr. Calloway, I didn't realize you'd be arriving from this entrance. Let me get you settled." He didn't say it loudly. He said it the way you say something to someone you know. Direct, normal, unremarkable. Except that the group had stopped moving. Brittany's mother turned first. Then my Aunt Renee. Then, slowly, my mother. Derek turned from the front of the group, and his expression moved through about 4 different things in the span of 2 seconds. My father said very quietly, "What did he say?" I want to be precise about what I felt in that moment, because I've thought about it a lot since, and I think precision matters here. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel the surge of satisfaction I might have expected, or maybe feared, from a moment like that. What I felt was tired. A specific kind of tired that doesn't come from physical exertion. It comes from carrying something heavy for a long time and suddenly being allowed to set it down. I had not engineered this. I had not called Marcus and orchestrated a reveal. I had specifically told him not to introduce me. What happened was the simplest, most human thing. An employee recognized his employer and said hello. That was all. But in my family's framework, that simple hello restructured everything they thought they knew about me. Marcus led me through the entrance. After a brief pause, the group followed. We were seated in the private dining room. Round tables, soft lighting, the kind of room that makes conversations feel more important than they are. I was placed at the main table, which had not been my assigned seat. Marcus had quietly rearranged things. I didn't ask him to, he just did it. Brittany's mother leaned across the table partway through the appetizer course and asked, with genuine and almost academic curiosity, how I was connected to the restaurant. I said I was one of the owners. She said, "Oh, I didn't realize. Derek didn't mention." I said Derek didn't know. She sat with that for a second and then said, "Well, that explains the upgrade on the room." I said I hadn't arranged an upgrade. She smiled the way people smile when they're recalibrating and haven't finished yet. My mother, seated 2 seats down, was not eating her appetizer. She was looking at the tablecloth. My father found me near the end of the evening, when people had started to drift toward the bar area and the formality of dinner had loosened into something more general. He stood beside me and looked out at the room for a moment before he spoke. He said, "You own this place." I said I was a partial owner, yes, part of a real estate partnership that acquired the building. Callaway's is the anchor tenant on the ground floor. He said, "And you didn't tell us." I said, "No." He asked why. I thought about that for a moment. I thought about every Christmas where Derek's promotion was announced over dessert and my mother's face lit up like something being turned on. I thought about every question directed at Derek at every dinner while I sat 2 chairs over, eating quietly. I thought about the parking lot 20 minutes earlier and my mother's hand on my arm. I said, "I don't know that it would have changed anything, Dad." He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "We should talk more." I said, "Yes, we should." We didn't that night, but he said it, and I noted that he said it, and I filed it somewhere I could find it later. Derek came to me before I left. He had clearly had a few drinks, and his version of sincerity under those conditions tends to come out sideways, but I think he meant what he said. He said, "I had no idea, man." I said, "I know." He said, "Why didn't you ever say anything?" And that was the question I'd been carrying for longer than I'd known I was carrying it. I told him the truth. I said, "Because I got tired of asking to be seen, so I just kept going." He didn't know what to do with that. I didn't expect him to. Now right then, not after 3 drinks at his engagement party, but something in his face moved, something behind the confusion, and I thought maybe it landed somewhere it would do some work later. I shook his hand. I congratulated him again on Brittany. I meant it. I drove home that night on a road I've driven 100 times and thought about the version of myself that used to sit at family dinners and wait. Wait to be asked. Wait to be acknowledged. Wait for someone to wonder what I was building when no one was looking. I stopped waiting somewhere around year 3, when I realized that waiting was its own kind of trap. You wait, and while you're waiting, the thing you're waiting for gets to keep defining you. It gets to keep saying you're not enough. And you nod, and you pass the potatoes, and you tell yourself that one day they'll understand. The problem with that plan is that understanding requires curiosity, and curiosity requires the belief that something worth understanding might exist. My family never quite got to curiosity. They stayed on the first floor of who I was and called it the whole building. I don't say that with bitterness. I've done enough work on myself to know that bitterness is just grief that hasn't found the right door yet. What I feel now is something more like clarity, the kind that doesn't need an audience. My mother called me 4 days after the party. The conversation was short. She said she had been thinking and that she wanted me to know she was proud of me. I thanked her. She said she wished she had known sooner. I said gently that she had known me the whole time. The information was always the same. What changed was the context she needed to see it in. There was a long pause. She said, "That's fair." I said, "I love you, Mom." She said she loved me too. We hung up, and I sat at my desk for a while looking at nothing in particular. I'm not looking for a reconciliation narrative here. I'm not the person who wraps things up clean at the end and says the hard work paid off and the family came together over Sunday dinners from then on. Real families don't work like that. Mine certainly doesn't. What I know is this. That night at Callaway's wasn't about the restaurant or the ownership or the moment Marcus said my name. It was about a simple and brutal truth that I think a lot of people quietly carry around. The people who are supposed to see you clearly are sometimes the ones most completely unable to do it. And you can spend your whole life standing in front of them asking them to look, or you can build something real, in the quiet, where no one's watching, and trust that the work will eventually speak for itself. I chose the second option. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't revenge. It was just the truth, doing what the truth eventually does, arriving on its own, in its own time, without asking anyone's permission. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. I've thought about what it actually takes to become someone your family doesn't recognize, not because you changed, but because they were never really looking. What happened at Callaway's that night wasn't luck. It wasn't some sudden reversal of fortune. It was the result of 6 years of choices made in rooms where no one was watching and no one was applauding. 6 years of showing up to work that didn't feel glamorous, of signing documents that nobody in my family would have understood, of building something real out of the part of myself they had written off as ordinary. That's the part people don't talk about when they tell stories like this one. They talk about the moment, the reveal, the look on someone's face, the silence that follows a name being said out loud in the wrong context. But the moment is just the surface. underneath it is every morning you got up and did the work anyway, even when nothing around you confirmed that it mattered. My mother's hand on my arm in that parking lot, that was her truth. She wasn't being cruel. She was operating from every data point she had collected about me over 30 years, and in her framework, those data points added up to someone who needed to be careful about the menu. That's the thing about the people closest to you. They stop updating their information at some point and they don't always know they've done it. I don't think that makes her a bad person. I think it makes her human in a way that most of us are human. Fixed on the version of someone we first decided to see. Unable to imagine that the story kept going after we stopped reading it. What I know now, in a way I couldn't have articulated at 23, is that character is the thing you build in the absence of recognition. Not despite it, in it. The years when nobody asks how it's going. When nobody expects much. When you pass the potatoes and smile and drive home to a life that no one in that dining room would believe. Those years are not wasted. They are the structure. Everything else is just what stands on top of them. Integrity is choosing the hard version of a thing when the easy version is available and no one would know the difference. Derek's engagement party was booked at a venue I had a stake in. I could have said nothing and let the evening be what it was. I could have used it. I didn't, because that's not why I built what I built. I built it because I believed in the work. The rest was always going to follow or not follow on its own terms. Marcus said my name that night and the room shifted. But I had been in that room, in rooms like it, for years before anyone in my family knew to look. The work was already done. The foundation was already poured. What changed was only what they could finally see. That's how it works, I think, when you're honest about it. The life you build in private eventually becomes visible, not because you force it to the surface, but because truth at some point just stops staying quiet. I drove home that night feeling something I hadn't expected to feel. Not vindicated, not satisfied in the way I might have imagined. Just settled. Like a long equation that had finally balanced. Like I could stop holding my breath. That feeling didn't come from my mother's phone call 4 days later. It didn't come from my father saying we should talk more. It came from knowing that I had built something real. That I had done it the right way, and that neither of those facts had ever required anyone's permission to be true.